This is a story of a multi-billion-dollar company with one shareholder and no CEO. A company that created a new sports discipline and managed to take control of one of the Blizzard's most popular games. About a billionaire who built an empire without outside funding and launched a system that later triggered the largest underground gambling boom among kids the industry had ever seen.
And at the center of it all is Gabe Newell, an engineer who left Microsoft with a deep irritation toward managers and turned that frustration into the foundation of a new kind of company called Valve. And what you're about to hear has never been told in full on YouTube. Some parts of this investigation were even reviewed by actual lawyers before being recorded. Valve begins as an anomaly organization, and for many years it generated more net profit per employee than Google or Amazon at their peaks. And inside Valve, there is no HR department or junior to senior career ladders. Instead, one principle defines the entire system. If desks on wheels aren't rolling toward you, you're almost fired. Inside Valve, people form teams and ideas through self-organization, and no one assigns anyone to anything. This is not a legend, but the documented history of specific projects. The first version of Steam was built by a micro team of 3 or 4 engineers. Major stages of Counter-Strike development were made by a handful of people. Steam Deck didn't begin as a massive corporate initiative. It started with a few engineers and designers. There were moments when Gabe Newell personally approved critical patches. To understand why Valve works this way, you need to understand Gabe Newell. The absence of hierarchy, the rejection of managers and focus on individual initiative did not appear by chance. Before Valve, he spent 13 years at Microsoft. During the years when the company became a technological giant, Newell worked on early versions of Windows, ported software, and helped build the production pipeline that gave Microsoft its dominance over personal computers. During that time, he observed a structure built on procedures, layers of management, and internal battles for influence. Early Microsoft employees didn't just receive salaries, they received large stock options. This era made him wealthy. Most of the capital used to build Valve came from Microsoft, not gaming. But it also taught him what he never wanted to repeat. He watched engineers lose energy in endless alignment sessions.
People say his last day at Microsoft looked just ordinary. He sat in a meeting room while 7 managers discussed how they would coordinate the future process of coordination. Later he called it the point of no return. Sitting at an oval table under warm lights, he realized he could remain rich, but he would never be free. That evening he closed his laptop and never returned.
Newell is an introvert who avoids publicity and refuses to build a cult around himself. He does not hold a team together with motivational speeches. His influence is structural. He builds an environment that functions even when he is not present. Former employees recall a repeating scene. Gabe appears unexpectedly, asks a deep technical question, dives into the details, and disappears for months. The company continues as if nothing changed. The core of his story is infrastructure. Newell realized early that real power in gaming comes not from the games themselves, but from the rails they run on. He saw how difficult it was to deliver updates, support players, run multiplayer, and control distribution. This insight pushed Valve toward its most important pivot. The company shifted from standalone titles to full platforms. Gabe's principle was simple. When you build tools for thousands of creators, you don't need to build as much yourself. Games matter, but infrastructure matters more. Steam and its wider ecosystem, from the workshop to the CS economy and Valve's hardware, all follow the same idea, that real power belongs to whoever controls the network. And on top of that infrastructure, Valve made a quieter but equally important move. It took control of a game that, by all logic, should have ended up at Blizzard. Defense of the Ancients, Dota, started as a simple fan-made mod for Warcraft 3. It began with a creator known as Yule, then grew under Guinsoo and later under Icefrog. Long before the word MOBA existed, the mod had already become its own genre. Blizzard owned Warcraft 3 game and its editor, but it never treated Dota as a real product. For years, the map lived in a legal gray zone. Community work, informal permissions, and no clear owner.
Valve didn't clone the game. Instead, it hired the person who shaped it the most. In 2009, IceFrog quietly announced he was working with Valve on a new project, and that project became Dota 2.
Valve then did what Blizzard had not. It moved to secure the Dota trademark. Blizzard, with their Dota All-Stars brand, opposed the filing, arguing that Dota was a community asset and part of the Warcraft ecosystem. The dispute escalated into a formal legal opposition. On one side, Valve with IceFrog and a standalone sequel. On the other, Blizzard, holding the editor, the original game, and years of community history. In 2012, the parties settled. Valve received undisputed commercial rights to use the Dota name, including for Dota 2. Blizzard retained non-commercial rights, allowing fans to use Dota for custom maps in Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, but Blizzard lost the ability to build a new commercial title under that brand. Their planned Blizzard Dota project was renamed, eventually becoming Heroes of the Storm without the Dota label. On the surface, this looked like a compromise. In practice, Valve had taken the commercial identity of the most influential mod built on Blizzard's own platform. A community project, grown inside Warcraft 3, moved under the control of a company that neither created the engine nor owned the original universe. Valve simply saw where the genre was heading and moved faster in lore and infrastructure. Valve, in many ways, is the projection of Gabe Newell's character. A company that refuses to act like a corporation, a system more important than any single person, yet shaped by its founder so deeply that it continues functioning even when he is not in the room. He didn't build a studio, he built an ecosystem. Games are only the visible layer. Under them lie the tools, processes, and principles that make Valve unique. His biography is not decoration. It explains the structure of the entire company. Half-Life and Half-Life 2 weren't just commercial successes. They proved that a system without managers and strict deadlines could create works that redefine an entire medium. Before Half-Life, story in shooters was background, a block of text before levels or short cutscenes between missions. Valve shifted the center of gravity, narrative fused with gameplay. The player's route became a continuous corridor where space, events, and story formed a single structure. That is why Half-Life was seen as cinematic long before the term became a cliché. Half-Life also redefined the relationship between technology and storytelling. Scripts, triggers, and NPC behavior became directing tools. The player wasn't reading a story, he was inside it. The train ride into Black Mesa, scientists chatting, the catastrophe unfolding as a live sequence instead of a cutscene. All of this required precise coordination that in classical studios belonged to directors, not engineers. Half-Life 2 reinforced the approach by making physics the foundation of interaction. Source wasn't just a graphics engine, it was a physical model that shaped gameplay. The gravity gun looked like a gimmick, but it was a manifesto. If physics is flexible, interaction becomes the heart of player joy. Barrels, planks, doors, bridges, everything stopped being decoration. The world became a system governed by consistent laws through which you could tell a story. One pivotal event was the Half-Life 2 leak.
It wasn't long before the Half-Life 2 source code leaked onto the internet, specifically on BitTorrent sites.
When the source code hit the internet, the office atmosphere felt like a server room without cooling. Developers quietly read their own code on hacker forums. One recalled Gabe walking down the corridor and saying softly, "We will never be this vulnerable again." Around that same period, a different vulnerability almost destroyed Valve, and it came not from hackers, but from a publisher and a courtroom. Valve's early games were published by Sierra, later acquired by Vivendi. After Counter-Strike became a global phenomenon, Vivendi began distributing Valve's games to South Korean internet cafes, PC bangs, under terms Valve believed exceeded their original contract. Valve sued, expecting a narrow dispute over royalties. Vivendi responded with a barrage of counterclaims, attempts to reclaim rights to Half-Life, to limit Valve's ability to self-distribute, to control future releases. Legal fees grew faster than revenue. Newell later said the company was close to bankruptcy, and he was close to personal bankruptcy.
Vivendi burned Valve's lawyers under millions of pages of discovery documents, many of them in Korean, hoping time, translation, and cost would tilt the case. Inside that mountain of paperwork, one summer intern changed everything.
Andrew, a Korean-speaking intern at Valve's law firm, spent weeks combing through obscure files. He found an email between Vivendi managers discussing the destruction of evidence related to the cyber cafe business. That single document turned from background noise into a weapon. It showed the court that Vivendi had not only overstepped the contract, but had actively tried to bury proof of it.
There's these other emails between these vice presidents where one says something like, "Hey, we destroyed those Valve documents like you asked."
The balance flipped. Valve settled on terms that secured the Half-Life and Counter-Strike IP, reclaimed control over cybercafe licenses, and reinforced its right to distribute its own games. A lawsuit that could have destroyed the company instead led to one conclusion: you cannot trust intermediaries with your rails. Valve survived, but the incident accelerated a transformation. Games had to be tied tightly to Valve's own delivery and verification infrastructure. Steam, in this logic, wasn't a store. It was an answer to vulnerability. Half-Life 2 became one of the first titles requiring activation through Steam, and many players hated it. But the combination of a physical disk, mandatory online validation, and centralized updates gradually became normal. A leak that could have destroyed trust instead justified a system that placed Valve above the physical medium and made the platform more important than the box. Above this new layer grew the Counter-Strike skin economy. Skins were introduced as decoration, a way to change weapon appearance without affecting balance. But months later, a new system formed around them. Players realized skins differed by rarity, quality, and demand. Pricing charts, liquidity tables, and valuation models appeared. Terms like float value, wear groups, rare patterns, collections, and series entered everyday vocabulary. Analytics sites looked like trading terminals. Valve provided cosmetic items and a trading tool. The community built a stock exchange.
The more someone plays, the more emotional weight they attach to their inventory. Skins develop personal histories, key matches, lucky drops, milestones. Value becomes a mix of rarity and attachment. Financial and emotional capital grow together.
Another layer sits on top, the maybe economy built on cases. Cases are inexpensive. The potential reward, rare knives or high-tier skins, is worth thousands. The probability is tiny, but not zero. Research shows dopamine peaks during anticipation, not reward. When the animation spins and expensive items pass by, the brain lives in the maybe space. Cases function as behavioral machines. Animations are designed so expensive items almost drop. Optimal rarity thresholds keep true chances under 0.26%, rare enough to feel special, common enough to feel achievable. The 2-second anticipation window is tuned to maximize dopamine. Valve turned neurobiology into a monetization mechanic. Even when tournament views fall, teams collapse, or scandals erupt, the skin economy continues. People keep opening cases, trading, speculating. And here begins the uncomfortable part. The first victims weren't traders or investors, they were children. At its peak, the skin economy created a new form of gambling, using skins as casino chips. Many gambling sites appeared, each offering simple chance-based games built on top of Steam trades. Most of these platforms ran without licenses or age checks, relying entirely on the Steam API to move items instantly. Annual volumes grew into the tens of billions of dollars. US regulatory documents later described this space as the largest unregulated teenage gambling network in North America, with some sites reaching $7 to $10 billion in yearly turnover. Regulators launched investigations across the US and Europe. The key factor was simple. Steam's API allowed minors to gamble without age verification, and this made the market explode. As the scale became undeniable, Western courts entered the story. The US Department of Justice began treating skin platforms as infrastructure for illegal gambling targeting minors. Internal memos compared them to classical casinos, licensed venues with KYC, age checks, reporting, versus anonymous online roulettes that children could access more easily than buying a lottery ticket.
Are now being named in a class action lawsuit because the plaintiff lost money gambling on Counter-Strike.
Civil lawsuits followed. Parents sued platform owners and, in some cases, Valve, arguing that Steam's ecosystems enabled underage gambling. In one lawsuit, parents described walking into their son's room late at night and finding him with his head in his hands, not because he lost skins, but because he lost real money he had saved for months.
Regulators also targeted influencers who promoted gambling sites. The FTC handled cases of hidden sponsorships. The loudest case involved YouTubers who secretly co-owned the casino they advertised, showing random wins with no disclosure.
We found this new site called CSGO Lotto.
It had all the makings of a great scam.
Dude, you could just swing for the fences with one bet and just come away up $5,000.
The FTC ruling set a precedent. If you own or are paid by a platform, you must disclose it, especially where money, gambling, and minors intersect. Ad networks distanced themselves from skin casino traffic. YouTube and Twitch tightened rules.
Europe focused on classification. Regulators in the UK, Netherlands, Belgium, and others debated whether loot boxes and skin gambling qualify as gambling. Some said yes, others took intermediate positions. But everywhere money, randomness, and minors intersected, regulators stepped in. Valve tried to remain distant. The company positioned itself as a platform provider. Steam offers inventory and API, but explicitly forbids gambling. Under pressure, Valve blocked some sites and updated APIs to hinder automated transfers, yet it never accepted the label of gambling operator. For Valve, skin gambling was unwanted, emergent, and profitable, a byproduct of openness.
That growth in the player base typically comes either after the game has been on sale, or after we've added some features to the game that make the game a stickier experience.
The outcome was mixed. Many toxic platforms disappeared. Some owners faced lawsuits. Ad networks cut ties. But the core mechanic barely changed. Peripheral structures collapsed. The foundation remained. Steam hosts valuable digital assets. Miners want to gamble. Third parties exploit the gap. Western cases showed you can slow the system, but you cannot dismantle it without altering Valve's core architecture. Skin gambling was only one front. In Australia, the regulator sued Valve for violating consumer rights laws over refunds. Valve argued digital goods were non-returnable. The court disagreed, forcing Valve to change policy and creating a precedent that treated a digital platform as a retailer. In Europe, the European Commission investigated Valve for geo-blocking. The result forced Valve to revise distribution rules and abandon practices limiting free movement of digital goods. Each case added a new layer. Valve wanted to remain infrastructure, but the world increasingly viewed it as a global, economic, and legal actor. Meanwhile, a quieter transformation unfolded. For many children, skins became their first financial asset, something to buy, hold, and sell while watching prices move. They learned to read charts, spot entry and exit points, analyze volatility, attempt arbitrage. Schools couldn't recreate this experience. It was accidental financial education. Between 2018 and 2022, a shadow derivative system emerged. Skin banks appeared, digital depositories storing inventory and issuing receipts that circulated like surrogate assets. High-value trades moved off public markets into private OTC pools. Skin collateralized lending became common. Owners of rare knives rented them out for 3 to 7% monthly returns, a hybrid of gaming and DeFi. Some platforms introduced funding rates, simple fees for holding valuable skins over time. As markets grew, traders began spotting price differences between regions and platforms, turning these gaps into basic arbitrage opportunities. They built routes, used VPN to move between markets, and automated parts of the process to keep it running around the clock. During the period from 2017 to 2021, these strategies sometimes produced large spreads, and a few traders earned tens of thousands a month. Most of this no longer happens manually. Automated bots now scan prices, place orders, and execute trades at scale. The skin market gradually turned into an API-driven financial system, where portfolios look more like small investment funds than gaming inventories.
Valve owns the rails. Players and markets fill them with value, speculation, liquidity, and risk. Valve earns on every transaction without managing the microeconomy itself, which makes it very different from publishers who try to control every part of their in-game markets.
Sticker monetization became another profit engine. Major stickers are one of the strongest revenue mechanisms in modern esports. A single major sticker revenue can reach $40 to $70 million. Profits are shared between Valve, teams, and players. For some organizations, stickers generated more income than all esports operations combined. In certain years, sticker revenue exceeded annual sales of Half-Life 2. There is one more layer to this story, a layer that could become the most serious threat Valve will face in the coming years. Not from competitors, not from technology, but from regulators trying to fit digital items into legal categories built for another century. For players, skins are entertainment. For Valve, they are an engine of engagement and retention. But to regulators, they increasingly resemble financial instruments and gambling mechanics disguised as game design. The legal problem is simple and dangerous at the same time. There is no clean modern category in law that accurately describes what a skin inside Steam actually is. If a few major jurisdictions decide to classify skins as financial assets or gambling instruments, Valve could face licensing requirements, KYC obligations, age gates, hard spending caps, or even regional shutdowns. In other words, the wrong legal label could break the rails that make this entire ecosystem work. And this is why Valve needs a new layer, a legal and technical architecture built specifically for digital items, not as a trick to escape regulation, but as a precise definition regulators can work with instead of forcing skins into categories designed for casinos and securities. I will call it the Steam Digital Asset Classification Framework. At its core is a new legal category, the Digital Interaction Artifact, a digital object that exists only within Steam, has no redemption right in classical money, is bound to specific gameplay context, and cannot be treated as a currency, a security, or a gambling instrument. In practice, that means three pillars. First, metadata. Every item carries an explicit legal profile, where it can be used, whether it can be traded, whether external cash-out is technically possible, and what age and regional rules apply. Second, rule engines. The platform enforces these profiles automatically. If an item crosses a boundary into financial risk, its behavior changes. Trading modes switch off, gifting freezes, inventory actions become rate-limited. Third, geo-adaptive restrictions. The same item behaves differently in Belgium, Korea, or the US, aligned with local law without rewriting the entire game for every country. Within that setup, the DIA acts as a protective shell around the whole ecosystem, a way to show regulators that these items are tightly controlled interaction artifacts, not casino chips floating freely in the market. It gives courts and agencies something clear to recognize and supervise without pushing them toward attacking the platform itself. And there is a reason I talk about this openly. This is not internal Valve policy and not legal advice. It is my proposal, an outside attempt to translate how regulators think into a framework that could protect both players and the platform at the same time. I believe someone at Valve will eventually see this video. If anyone inside the company hears this, I want them to understand one thing. I'm not criticizing from the outside. I want to contribute to what Valve is building and help bring this kind of framework to life so Steam can stay independent no matter how the world changes. Now step back to the wider industry. From 2015 to 2020, the industry sold itself as the new NFL. Presentations showed esports viewership approaching football TV ratings. It was marketed as the ultimate channel to reach Gen Z. But the legal and economic structure was unstable from the beginning. Teams and leagues did not own the product. In classical sports, no one can patch the ball, rewrite the rules overnight, or delete an entire stadium with a software update. In esports, the publisher can do all of that.
Riot, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft and Valve control every core part of their games, from the technology to the rules, and the right to run competitions. Teams, on the other hand, own only their branding and their contracts, all of it resting on someone else's platform. And when a publisher changes direction, those teams have no real way to respond.
This weakness pushed the industry toward franchising. Teams spent massive sums to buy league spots, hoping it would give them safety and predictable growth. The Overwatch League alone consumed over $500 million in total investment. But audience numbers dropped, the game slowed down, and the promised TV deals never appeared. In the end, teams got back only a small portion of their money, far less than they had committed. Financials exposed the truth. Many clubs operated at heavy losses for years. CLG lost around $6 million annually. Riot spent 5 to 7 times more than its leagues generated. FaZe stock fell to around 18 cents after IPO. GameSquare became a refinancing machine. Heroic moved into offshore gambling to cover deficits. Sponsors delayed payments or disappeared entirely. Between 2020 and 2023, Western esports entered crisis. Leagues downsized or closed. Famous organizations neared bankruptcy. Some teams sold for a fraction of their former value. Others shifted into offshore gray zones. Behind the polished branding of Western esports, another truth was hiding, one that almost no organization wanted to admit publicly. A significant share of top esports teams in Europe, North America, and even the CIS region were financed by companies whose real business was skin gambling. Sometimes indirectly, sometimes through offshore structures, and sometimes openly but unspoken. When you trace ownership records, investment rounds, or shell company structures, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Casino money, especially from unregulated skin gambling, propped up the budgets of organizations that claimed to represent the future of sports. Against this backdrop, Valve's model looked radically different. Valve does not sell slots, does not guarantee salaries, does not build permanent leagues, does not anchor its business to esports revenue. Valve releases a game, provides the basic infrastructure it needs like anti-cheat systems or APIs, and then allows the community and tournament organizers to build the rest around it. For Valve, esports is simply a result of a strong game and a healthy economy, not an industry that needs constant support to survive. Valve survived the collapse with minimal damage. Its core revenue comes not from broadcasts or sponsorships, but from Steam, cases, stickers, and player engagement. If major viewership dropped by a third tomorrow, nothing catastrophic would happen. The system is built on players, not spectators. This became even clearer in direct conversations. At the Icon Partners law firm where I work, we handled acquisitions of esports teams, in Dota and in Counter-Strike. Talking to owners revealed the same truth. The economics did not work. Teams operated at losses for years. Owners did not buy them for returns, they bought them for meaning. One called it an expensive hobby, another a way to be part of a culture I love. Esports organizations were not business assets. They were participation in a world people grew up with. This revealed something fundamental. Esports in Valve's model rests on people, not revenue. The first CS2 major in Copenhagen showed how the ecosystem was changing. Na'Vi won without core player called Simple, the 3-time best player in the world, and the face of Counter-Strike for a decade. A new generation stepped onto the stage. Teenagers raised in a world of skins, float values, Buff 163 trading, and Discord speculation channels. At the same time, controversy swirled around skin casinos, sponsorships, and dubious brands entering the space. It felt like an industry rebuilding itself after a decade of inflated expectations. The CS2 major made something clear. Leagues can collapse, brands can disappear, generations can shift. But the game and the economy around it remain more stable than the business structures built on top of them. This same pattern appears in hardware. Steam Deck looks like a handheld console, but it solves a strategic problem. For years, Valve depended on Windows and DirectX. Microsoft controlled the platform powering PC gaming. Launching a Linux-based OS and porting the library via Proton was an attempt at independence. Deck is not just a device. It is a real-world test of digital sovereignty. In a world where a platform can disconnect entire countries for political reasons, controlling your own hardware, your own system, and your own store becomes a matter of survival. Low margins on devices are simply a strategic cost, not a mistake in the business model. And Valve isn't stopping with handhelds. Inside the company, another device has been developing for years, a standalone VR headset internally known as Decard and now referred to as Steam Frame. While Meta builds a closed VR ecosystem through Facebook accounts, proprietary stores, and strict platform rules, Valve is attempting the opposite. Steam Frame is designed as a fully autonomous headset running a Linux-based Steam OS VR, with its own compute hardware, inside-out tracking, and a wireless PC mode using high-bandwidth streaming. This is not a gadget. It is another sovereignty play. If Steam Deck reduced dependence on Windows and DirectX, Steam Frame aims to reduce dependence on Meta and its tightening control over the VR space. Valve wants to own the rails of virtual reality the way it owns the rails of PC gaming. A standalone operating system, an open storefront, developer tools, a global distribution network, all without a gatekeeper above them. For Valve, VR is not the future of gaming. It is the next digital territory, a space where Valve can extend the same model, infrastructure first, platforms over products, sovereignty through hardware. Despite Steam's global reach, the true test of digital statehood began in China. Steam China exists, a controlled version built with perfect world. It lacks thousands of games, has no workshop, no skin economy, and few social tools. It is Steam filtered through cultural, technical, and political controls. The paradox: millions still access the global Steam inside China. Everyone knows a single government decision could erase their libraries with one button. For Valve, this became the first confrontation with a political system at the scale of a state, not a regulator or commission, but a country that could restrict their digital territory for a fifth of humanity. The Chinese case revealed a brutal truth: Steam is global, but not sovereign. This is why Valve keeps building an architecture able to survive pressure, including regional shutdowns. Another key feature is Valve's global reach. The company has no big office network, no huge PR machine, and no powerful lobby. Yet Steam still became dominant across many major regions of the world. This growth came from simple ideas: fair prices, easy payments, and low friction for players. Over time, people built large Steam libraries and treated them as valuable digital assets, something they would never want to lose. Valve's economic power is visible. Its cultural power is deeper. Steam's algorithms, sales, and visibility rules determine which games survive and which disappear. In some years, a change in homepage placement multiplied sales of individual games by thousands of %. This influence is invisible but pervasive. Steam became not only an economic center, but a cultural filter. It decides what becomes part of global gaming culture. For indie studios, a Steam ban or rejection is almost a death sentence. And when you look at Valve as a whole rather than through individual moments, one thing becomes clear. Valve is no longer just a game studio from another era. It has turned into a piece of digital infrastructure, something that quietly supports a huge part of modern gaming.
Most players never think about this layer. They simply press play. But between that click and the world that loads, an invisible framework keeps everything together. And Valve is the one maintaining it. This is the kind of architecture I investigate on this channel. You are watching Dr. Claus, long-form stories about the hidden structures shaping technology and the digital world around us. If you want to see where the next investigation leads, you know where to find the channel. Thank you and have a good one.